Mic check 1 2. Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for joining me. I am your host, James Nichols of Devils Rink Report and New Jersey Hockey Now. And today we got a special guest coming on. We got Peter Baugh of The Athletic, who was gracious enough to lend me his time and join me. And we're excited to get him on the show today. And anything to talk about today? I mean, anything happen? Any news break within the last couple hours of the day? I don't know. You're gonna have to tell me. I'm not sure if enough of us wrote about it or talked about it on X today. But a little bit of Steven Stamkos chatter, something to talk about on the show today. We will do that with Peter when he joins us in a few, and we will do that individually with you guys. So before we get going, just guys, make sure to please give the link a like. If you're not already subscribed, please be sure to do so now. The more you help us, the more we can help you and provide more of this content. Which, listen, you guys have told us that you love so much. So we're hoping that you join the community, participate in the chat, ask all the questions. And listen, we're going to answer them. We're going to answer them today. I know you guys have a lot of questions about, team performance lately and, how things have been going and, how can the Devils get some help here? Like, are they going to actually go through with, a Steven Stamkos trade? Are there, potentially better options? What can the Devils do here to right the ship that is seemingly off of its track? So we'll get going here with Peter as soon as he joins us soon. He'll be standing by in a moment, but a couple news and notes just before puck drop tonight, 3:30. 3:30. That's our start time. The puck drop tonight is 7 o'clock with the Vegas Golden Knights at the Prudential Center. We don't know who will be in net for them. Could be Carter Hart. It could be Akira Schmid. We'll see if it's a revenge game for Schmid or if it is a return to the Metropolitan Division for Carter Hart. It does look like Alexander Holtz will not play against the Devils today. He was on the ice this morning with the healthy scratches, so it does look like he's trending towards being scratched, which is pretty much why he's not with the Devils anymore. He's a spare part, an extra forward, so it seems like that's why the Devils did not retain that player. For the Devils, the only change in the lineup for them is Juho Lammikko comes out, and Angus Crookshank will make his Devils debut. Looks like he was on the fourth line for practice this morning, and looks like he'll be in the lineup tonight when the Devils host the Vegas Golden Knights. We will talk more about that matchup tonight a little bit later on. But standing by now is Peter Baugh, and we're excited to bring him on the show for his first appearance on the Devils Rink Report. Peter, how are you today, man?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you, James.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Thanks for hopping on and coming on Devil's Rink Report. It's fairly new, right? This is something that we're trying out for only a couple weeks now. So I'm happy to have you on as an early guest. So we appreciate you being here. Um, but you're a man who has his eyes on many Metropolitan Division teams right now, and I just want to jump right into it with you. I know your eyes are in a lot of places. I don't know how much of each team you've gotten to watch lately, but two of these Metropolitan teams are trending in one direction. A couple wins for the New York teams lately, whereas the Devils are trending in the other direction. What are you seeing as the biggest difference between these two teams, and why the trends are going in the opposite directions?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is just that seasons come with ebbs and flows, and I think we know that every year. I mean, there's going to be. We saw earlier this season the Devils got off to an awesome start that was really encouraging in terms of results, but also maybe had some of the underlying numbers maybe suggested that it was a little. They weren't quite as good as the results they were getting, and now they've come back to earth a bit. So you're just going to have stretches like this in a season. And then the other thing is obviously health for the Devils with Jack Hughes out, Brett Pesce out. It's a banged up group, and I think you're seeing that with them. Now the Islanders and Rangers both have injuries of their own, so and they're managing to play well right now. But to me, it's kind of just the ebbs and flows of the season and what happens. But I do think the Devils have there are some areas of concern we can get into that are starting to creep in.
Yeah, you mentioned the concerns, and that's certainly something that I did want to bring up. I don't know if you saw, which I think a lot of us saw at this point, the graphic that MSG Network put out the other night with the offensive chances, both on the rush and zone time and such. And with Jack Hughes in the lineup, it was top of the league, top 10, some categories top 5, but without Jack Hughes, I mean, we're talking 30th, 31st, 32nd even. Is this team, I mean, is it a case of an underperforming team, or is this the case that, the Devils are only as good as Jack Hughes is when he's in the lineup?
Yeah, I think there's a balance there, right? I mean, the good teams in the league, the best teams can survive when their best players are out. You look at if the Avs were down McKinnon, they would be worse for sure, but I think they would still find ways to win games. The Devils are in a situation, but I should say the Avs would probably not win the Stanley Cup without or without Nathan McKinnon. So the Devils are in an interesting situation where they're struggling to even get those wins that you need sometimes against not as great teams when Jack Hughes is out. And that's a bit of an issue because you need to be able to stay afloat when your best players are out. But I think we already knew that this team was only going to go as far in the playoffs as Jack Hughes was going to lead them. He's instrumental in whatever they do going forward.
And how much of a problem is that really? Like, obviously, we see how it's going with him out of the lineup. But other teams, I mean, they're not making the same excuses. You look at a team like the Lightning, who, yeah, I mean, they have the pedigree, former champions, but they're missing a headman. They're missing some key players. Braden Point's not playing, and they're still going well. They went from worst to
Half their
first, in
decor.
fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, half their decor is not there. So how do you explain that? Whereas one team can do it and the other can't, because I mean, you look at how the Devils are constructed, they still have elite players in the lineup. Timo Meier, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Dougie Hamilton. What's the difference here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the offense that Jack Hughes provides, the Devils have a lot of, like you said, elite or borderline elite players, but maybe don't have as many creators. Nico Hischier is an excellent two-way player and brings offense and certainly can create on his own, but not to the level of Jack Hughes. Timo Meier is, I don't know if he's creating as much on his own. They just need someone like Jack Hughes who can create offense. You mentioned rush chances, things like that. This all underscores the importance of him to their lineup, but also they're going to need more from some of the guys around him. And he's sure, certainly when Hughes first went out, like he's put up some big points, and there have been games that the Devils have deserved a better fate, but either, I mean, you look at that Columbus game, Jake Allen maybe lets in a few that he wants back, and they maybe deserved a better result that night. And obviously there was everything where they were down to 4 defensemen, and guys like Nemeth and Hughes are playing way more minutes than they probably needed to be. And so there, you can look at individual games and find examples, but I think that I don't know the exact way to state the difference other than that they just need Jack Hughes' offense and the ability to create. And without that, it's really tough. And the good teams can kind of fight through that and stay afloat. And the Devils might be able to do that. But I think that's the big thing is they need a creator.
Yeah, I want to touch on a few of those points too, but quickly before I do that, one of the other guys who's not in the lineup right now, obviously, is Brett Pesce. And
Yes.
the blue line, I mean, takes a hit, obviously. He's their best stay-at-home defenseman. And one of the things I've been saying is I don't know if this team, I mean, there are a lot of NHL defensemen or NHL-ready defensemen on the Devils, but I don't know if they're the right NHL-ready defenseman, because you lose a Pesce, and the next guy that you're going to call up is, a Seamus Casey, or the next guy you're going to put in the lineup is a Dennis Cholowski. These guys are all puck movers. I
Yeah.
don't know that they have another stay-at-home defenseman who can, be a seventh guy or a filling guy. Do you think that, maybe they should look for some help in that area, in that aspect? Because reaching down to Utica, I don't know that there's a guy that's ready who will be a defensive defenseman, who's ready and available if there is another injury. Hopefully, see a Pesci go out again, or when Kovacevic comes back, he's going well. But do they have the right kind of depth on the blue line?
I mean, it's the tricky thing there is that you don't want to. They have so many defensemen that is that really the area that if you want to make a short term improvement, that's how you want to use it. Like they have, unless you're going to make a big splash, which I'm sure we'll talk about that being a topic of discussion. But like, is getting kind of a plug and play defenseman really how you want to use chips right now, especially considering you have guys who are kind of supposed to be more like Brendan Dillon's a defensive defenseman. You have Siegenthaler's a guy who can play hard minutes. So you've got guys. They certainly miss Brett Pesce, but you're not going to find Brett Pesce on the trade market for cheap. You're not going to get some fill-in defenseman for pennies on the dollar that's going to do what Brett Pesce does. So I think, in my opinion, you kind of have to stay the course there for now, and they're going to suffer to some degree. You've seen how the chances allowed without Pesce are drastically worse than they were with Pesce. But at a certain point, like, you can't fill every hole right now. You have to be pragmatic about it. And I don't know if that is the most pressing need to use chips on right now.
Yeah, I think you're probably bang on there, and one of the things that is not happening right now is the puck isn't falling as much as it was. Obviously, pre-Jack injury, when he goes out of the lineup, that's going to happen. But the Devils' top players offensively are going pretty well. Nico Hischier is actually been carrying right now, and Timo Meier's right there behind him. But one of the guys who's lagging behind a little bit, he's picking up the assists, but Jesper Bratt hasn't filled the net, in a little bit here. It's been 13 games. So you'd have to think that if Bratt were scoring, then, the Devils would be going a little bit more well right now. I mean, it's not like they're getting blown out, 4-5-0. They're decently close games, except for, that Dallas game the other night. But if Bratt was going a little bit better, then so would the Devils be, right?
Yeah, one would think it. I mean, that's the way hockey works, is sometimes the puck isn't going in and things feel like the sky's falling, even if you're playing a similar type of hockey as you were before. And Bratt is probably, to some degree, it hurts having Hughes out for him too. They're guys who've played together and helped generate offense together. So there's an adjustment across the lineup there. I don't really worry about this for Bratt. I think very highly of him as a player. But it certainly is like you said, he's what are his goal numbers at? What's he at, 5? He has,
Yeah.
five goals and 21 assists, which, I mean, he's still racking up the assists. He's still close to point per game, but they need someone to put the puck in the net. But I think you kind of, to some degree, you have to weather the storm and hope that it changes. It's not an easy time of year to make moves externally. The prices are really high, I think, if the Devils were to try and go shopping for a fill-in. And I don't know if someone like Kiefer Sherwood, even though he's on a cheaper deal, is necessarily worth the acquisition cost, because I don't know if that's going to be the difference between you making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. Like, this team should be able to anyway, especially when Hughes comes back in the lineup. And I also think guys like that often come with some warts in their game. I think Kiefer Sherwood's an awesome player and a really good story, and he's made an awesome career for himself. But I also think his shooting percentage is really high this year, and that's probably bound to level out a bit.
Yeah, the asking price for Sherwood is something like a first-round pick plus, and I don't know if a guy who hasn't really reached the heights that you think he might this season in his career is the guy to buy on. But you mentioned, you need goals to come from somewhere, and there was some chatter today about who the Devils might be looking at.
Yeah.
Steven Stamkos is the name in question here. I don't know if he's in question for you, but he's in question for a lot of Devils fans. Just your thoughts on the fit of Stamkos, and if there's a better fit in your mind, or if that should be something that they consider.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that my colleague Pierre LeBrun put out today. It's an interesting question. I think the intimidating thing for me, if I'm the Devils, is the cap hit. I think Steven Stamkos in a vacuum has better hockey than he has shown this year in Nashville. I don't know if he's ever going to be the Steven Stamkos that we know as a 50-goal scorer. I don't know if that player is there anymore, but I think with someone who can get him the puck a little more readily on his line, I think there's a better player there than what we've seen this year. I think what's his cap at, $8 million a year for another year, a year after this one. I think that's a big asking price. So unless Nashville's willing to retain, which would add to the cost of getting him, I think that's a big I don't know, it's a big ask, and I think it's a big change, and you have to be really careful making an acquisition like this. He has 2 years after this one, so he's at $8 million for 2 years after this one, and his production this year has been, let's see, 11 points in 27 games, only 8 goals. That's a risky move to make. Now you could get him, and then suddenly he's on 30 goal pace again and looks like maybe 70% of what he was a few years ago. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, we've got a real player. But unless Nashville can retain, I don't know if that's where I'm using my best trade chips.
Yeah, you said it well. And, I was writing about it before and I was looking up his statistics. And last year was his second lowest scoring season since his rookie year, sans a shortened COVID-19 season or an injury season, right? So it's concerning, but there are, like you said, certain factors into why he's playing the way he is in Nashville. And you wonder if it could be different in New Jersey. But I got one more here for you, Peter. You used to cover before you were here in New York, and we're so happy to have you, by the way. But you used to cover a team in the Colorado Avalanche back in 2022 when they won a Stanley Cup. And I'm just wondering, when you look at the Devils versus that team that won a cup, a few years ago, what are the or how far off would you say the Devils are in terms of roster construction and structure? The Devils are from that team who took home a championship.
It's an interesting question because in some ways they're built similarly, in some ways they're built different. I think the Devils, when they are healthy, are really strong down the middle, which that Avalanche team was. If you look at that team centers, it had Nathan McKinnon, it had Nazem Kadri, it had JT Compher as a 1-2-3. The Devils, when they're going right, Hughes, Hischier, Glass, Glendening, the combination of centers is good. I actually did a story last year kind of examining how they stacked up on a Stanley Cup checklist that one of my coworkers made compared to both the Panthers and the Oilers last year. I think the biggest thing is probably just it's health luck, number one. I think this team, especially with where the East is, if they're fully healthy and playing right and is getting good goaltending, I think that's a team that can at least contend to win a couple of playoff rounds. We've already seen them win one. So they're not, I don't know if there's not a way to replicate a Cale Makar. They're not going to have Cale Makar, but they have good defensemen on their team, and they have a lot of defensemen on their team. And the depth there, I think, is really encouraging of, the guys you can have. But I think that it's almost like, this is going to sound harsh, but like their roster is almost just a slightly less talented version of that roster. It's built similarly, I guess is what I'm saying, of where it has kind of a young top line center, good supporting cast up the middle, good wingers. They don't have a Mikko Rantanen level wing, but I don't know if you necessarily need that to win, though it certainly helps. And Jesper Bratt's really good. So I don't know. I think you can see the similarities, but every cup winner is different. And a lot of it will come down to just who is playing, who is healthy and who's playing well and how the puck is bouncing at the time, which I know is frustrating because it's like we want answers in this sport, but so much of it is kind of, I don't want to say chance because it's not fully chance, but there's an element of it.
Do one more before I let you go, because you mentioned a couple names there. This one might be available too. Just how good do you think Kadri would look in a Devil sweater?
Again, it's another question of, in a vacuum, I think he would look really good. I think he still has like strong ability, and the idea of him slotting down to, I think any center they got. I mean, you look at Ryan O'Reilly's name's been coming up a bunch, but the fact that they could play your second line center role until Hughes is back, and then suddenly you have him as your third line center would be amazing. But with Kadri, it comes back to similarly with Stamkos of the contract. You've got to be really careful putting contracts like that on the books going into some pretty pivotal off seasons for the Devils, especially if certain players are available and the contracts that they have. Like, you've got to really be careful of if Kadri, I want to say, is at $7 million. I could be wrong.
He is.
Yeah, so $7 million on the books for another 3 seasons after this one, which will take him into his late 30s. That comes with a pretty high level of risk. I think O'Reilly's the center that makes a ton of sense to me. It's just gonna come at a really high price, and I don't know if the Tom Fitzgerald's going to have to decide if that's how he wants to use those chips. And he also has to be careful because say Quinn Hughes does become available, if the Devils want to be able to make a compelling offer, they can't you can't use all your cap space and all your trade chips now. So they have to be careful of kind of how they navigate that situation, which I think is certainly interesting with Vancouver struggling a little.
Quick 30 seconds, and I'll send you on your way. Of those three names that we just mentioned, Stamkos, Kadri, and O'Reilly, which one is Peter Baugh trading for if he's the GM of the New Jersey Devils?
I think O'Reilly, just because of the cap. And I think I also just love Ryan O'Reilly. I think he's an awesome two-way player. He does all the little things. I think he's someone who's been a captain before, good leader, and by the way, has some playoff success to his name. So I would probably trade for him mostly because of the contract. I mean, $4.5 million for this year and next is I think a really good deal for him. And I like the idea of a guy who could fit pretty seamlessly as a third line center when Hughes comes back. Because if you have Hughes, Hischier, O'Reilly, Glass down the middle going into the playoffs, that's pretty scary. But you have to think of the cost too. It comes with some risk.
Yeah, I think Trotz said something like, again, first round pick plus for a player like that. So
yeah, look what Brock Nelson got last year for the Island. Like Cal Ritchie is a really nice young prospect, former first round pick, and they got another first. So that's what the price is going to be. It's not going to be cheap to get any of these guys, and I think that the Devils have to be a little careful. But if they think they've got a legitimate chance to win, which if fully healthy in this Eastern Conference, I think is possible, then maybe you push in some chips.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. And I know that, a lot of the trade inactivity right now is just because of how high this market sounds like it is. So we'll see how this goes. But Peter, thank you so much for your time today. Will I see you at the Rock tonight?
Not tonight, but soon.
Okay. All right. Yep. Looking forward to it, buddy. Thank you for coming on, and we'll do this again soon.
Sounds good. Take care. Thanks for having me.
There he goes, Peter Baugh of The Athletic. Appreciate having him on. You could read him at The Athletic. He does great work covering all three Metropolitan Division teams in the New York area, the Islanders, the Rangers, and the Devils. Good friend, and really happy to have had him on the show today. And he wrote a great book too, by the way, if you have not ventured out and read his book about the Colorado Avalanche and that year that they won the Stanley Cup and their journey and everything. Really, really good read. One that you could find, I think, for a couple bucks on Amazon, and you should invest if you're a bookworm like I am. All right, let's move on to the week that was, starting with the Brendan Dillon 1000th NHL game, 5-3 loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And look, the obvious storyline there was, Brendan Dillon getting injured actually in that 1000th game. And I spoke to him, after the game, and he was in good spirits. He didn't play in that third period, but to see him come out and after he took that punch from Voronkov and he didn't have his gloves off yet, and there's a whole big stink online, a debate as to whether or not he was prepared for this fight or if he was not ready for this fight. Sheldon Keefe certainly did not, hesitate to say that he thought that it was something that he wouldn't do to somebody, and I completely understand Sheldon Keefe's stance on that. Brendan Dillon, like Keefe says, is one of the better people I've ever spoken to in a locker room. I mean, he is always happy to give me time. He's always, happy to have a conversation, and you never really see him having a bad day, and it's very genuine. So yeah, he's good for the occasional really big hit, but he doesn't have any ill intentions for anybody. He tries to play in a safe manner, but he plays a hard game. And look, the Devils, when they signed him, it looked like, are you sure you want to commit this kind of term and this kind of money to this player? In his first year, he had his highs and he had his lows, but this year, I mean, he's been a rock for this team. He's been a really important piece. So to see that he came back the following game and that he is, he's okay. It just speaks to his character. He's just, he's nails out there, and he's a true warrior. I know we throw that term around a lot, but he's one of the few who you really just like, you'd have to take a leg from him to keep him off of the ice. And last year when he got injured in the playoffs, I mean, the scene that I'm told that he threw behind scenes because he didn't want to come out of that game. He didn't want to stay off the ice. He wanted to be there for his teammates and help try to contribute to a win. Just speaks to the volume of player and the warrior that Brendan Dillon is. But um to the game itself, I mean, a quick 2-0 start for the Devils, and it looked like it was going to be a good night for them. And then that was kind of the turning point when, Brendan Dillon got hurt and, they gave up four straight goals and, they kind of broke down defensively. And, it wasn't a good night for the goaltenders either. So, and by goaltenders, I mean Jake Allen. It was his night that night. And he probably could have had a couple stops there that maybe would have kept them closer in the game or maintained the lead there. But, he wasn't at his best. He had a 800 save percentage by the end of the night, so 20 shots or 20 stops on 25 saves. The tough thing for them in that game too was that they went down to four defensemen. The flight strap for Jonas Siegenthaler was not secure, and he was thus tossed from the game. It's just a rule. It is what it is, and you have to have that fight strap secured. So he was tossed, and the Devils were short a defenseman, and then they were short another one when Brendan Dillon was injured. So that was a tough hurdle to overcome. You look at Luke Hughes and Simone Nemeth. They played upwards of 30 minutes, and I was honest. I said that's one of the nights. I get the criticisms of the young guys, but that's one of the nights that you look at and you say, okay, they were put in an impossible position. You don't criticize them for that game. I understand it everywhere else. I still think that these are guys who are, although have high ceilings and you're hopeful for them, they're still growing. So tough night for those guys on the blue line. But look, it was a tough night to lose to an in-division rival after having lost to the Philadelphia Flyers just a couple days before. That's essentially an 8-point swing, right? Those are 4-point games. You're not only losing 2 points, you're not or not losing, but not taking 2 points, but you're losing positional standings in the position in the standings. So, to do that twice in a row from the Flyers to the Blue Jackets, yeah, that's a tough stretch. And now, the Devils have lost three in a row, despite the everybody's favorite win-o-meter, indicating that they should have won. And look, the win-o-meter is not perfect, and we all like to joke about it and make a good deal of fun. It takes into account shot location, volume of shots, and such. And it's probably not a perfect model, and it's definitely not indicative of how those games went because the Devils did dominate in probably the opening, I want to say 25, 30 minutes of the game against the Blue Jackets, but then the final 30 was all Columbus. So a 54% uh, deserve to win chance for the Devils indicates that they dominated more of that game, and I would say that's probably not the case. Then Dallas comes into town, and it looked like again the Devils were going to have a decent night. They started well. They pressured Jake Ottinger pretty early. But that's the difference between Jake Ottinger and Jacob Markstrom. Jake Ottinger is going to steal you a game, and Jacob Markstrom is going to let in, a leaky goal or two. And I'm not saying that Jacob Markstrom did that against the Stars. I actually think he was pretty good against the Stars. Um, but Jake Ottinger early stopped in the opening shift Nico Hischier from scoring, and then Timo Meyer on the rebound. He stopped later in the game Juho Lammikko on a breakaway, and then Luke Glendening on a rebound. Um, and the crux of that game for the Devils was that they just weren't able to get on the inside of anything. The Dallas Stars did a really good job of layering their defense. They did a really good job of making sure that the Devils stayed to the perimeter and limiting them to low danger chances. And overall, look, we talk about the narrative of like, oh, do the Devils need to get bigger? Do they need to get stronger? I don't necessarily think that that's, you know, uh, it's either sink or swim in that department, but there is something to say about the Dallas Stars who are huge and they're very strong and they're, structured really well. So it's a perfect recipe for them who, look, we're not talking enough about the Dallas Stars as a whole, right? All the attention right now is on the Colorado Avalanche because they have such a huge goal differential and they're, two regulation losses almost 20 games into the season or over 20 games into the season. That's wild. They're playing historically and it's amazing. But the Dallas Stars are right there. And the Devils, they didn't have their best night. They had no punch on offense, right? And that's really where they missed Jack Hughes. It's a bit of an issue because I asked Sheldon Keefe about this. When you're not getting the top guys who are in the lineup in Hischier and Timo Meyer on the score sheet, what do you got to do to get the juices flowing with some of the depth guys here? Connor Brown, Cody Glass hasn't scored in a little bit. Dawson Mercer's gone cold, right? And he said, look, maybe you got to get a little bit of energy, a big hit, a big play, a big penalty kill, something like that. But we're looking for those kinds of things. And in the locker room, I asked Brendan Dillon about this too, and he's like, "Look, we're not going to replace a Jack Hughes. We're not going to replace, a Brett Pesci. But with the guys who are here, we got to do a much better job of at least trying to contribute a little bit of what those guys have to offer. This has to be a by committee thing. You look at the Lightning, you look at the Vegas Golden Knights are a bit injured there too, right? They're missing a lot of key players. They're doing fine, and one more so than the other. The Lightning are on fire right now. I think Brandon Hagel has something like crazy, like 15 goals in like 16, 17 games. It's actually crazy. Um, but you're not seeing the same results for a team in New Jersey who you're expecting to see them take that step into being a Stanley Cup contender. And this team needs to be more than what they are with Jack Hughes out of the lineup. They need to be they need to rid themselves of Jack Hughes or nothing. That narrative is something that needs to be shed from them. So look, it was a 30 save shutout from Ottinger. He made 2.26 goals, saves above expected. Which again, if those goals go in, then the Devils are still losing that game 3-2 in regulation. Um, 4 for 4 on high danger chances. I mean, that sounds to me like you didn't create enough high danger opportunities. There was nobody standing in front of Jake Ottinger to try to take his eyes away. Nobody was standing in front of the net to try and distract him from the play in front of him so that, maybe they can track his eyes elsewhere and score a goal. They need a bit more of that. They have guys to do that. Timo Meyer is that guy. Dawson Mercer does that a little bit. And look, Dawson Mercer scores the majority of his goals around the net. He's not really a dots up kind of guy. Um, but is he the biggest guy? Is he gonna be able to handle it the way Timo Meyer can handle it? Because Timo Meyer is a big guy. He's not the tallest, but he's a thick man. He's about 220 pounds. And he can handle those battles in front of the net. Can Dawson Mercer do the same? I mean, um he does his best. He does battle. I won't take that away from him, but he's not necessarily the biggest there. Maybe you want to see, somebody else stepping up in that department. Who that is, I don't know. Because the Devils don't necessarily have that guy in the lineup right now, and perhaps that's maybe something that they do need to address. Um, you're not going to have a Connor Brown stepping up to do that. You're not going to have a Cody Glass stepping up to do that. Maybe Stefan Nason is that guy. He scored 20 plus goals last year. He's not really going well right now. He's got one goal in 20 plus games. Look, maybe he is still dealing with a little bit of the injury he is recovering from or was recovering from over the summer when he got surgery. But he has not been up to snuff this season, and certainly reflecting. And he was a 20 goal scorer last season. Is he a 20 goal scorer regularly? I mean, that was the first time he did it. And before that, his career high was 14 goals. So I think they signed up Stefan Nason to be a depth guy. I mean, you saw that with the 3-year term at $2.75 million. That's a depth contract. And they're deploying him in a top six role. So, I mean, at least right now, he was playing last game with Timo Meyer and Nico Hischier. So, that's the thing is just being able to get somebody in the top six, maybe somebody who's a little bit bigger, and can put the puck in the net because these guys are not doing it. So we're starting to approach this leads us into the point of the conversation where we're wondering, is this the time where Fitz can't sit around anymore? Does he need to go looking for something externally? Brett Pesci's not close to coming back. Jack Hughes might be back for Christmas. I tend to think it's probably going to be somewhere in January. Um, Injuries have obviously been devastating. There's a little bit more than just Jack Hughes and Brett Pesci. Obviously, Dadonov's not in the lineup again. That hurts because you signed him for, this season to be perhaps that Toffoli light where he can be on that Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt line and just finish those chances. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. Jonathan Kovacevic, we're still waiting for him to come back from off-season surgery. Zach McEwen's out, and he was actually he looked really good for the Devils too in a depth position on that fourth line. He was somebody who was able to, you know, bang bodies, and his shot is underrated. I was really surprised to see how good he looked for the Devils in his brief stints that he's skated with them so far. Um, but outside of Nico Hischier and Timo Meyer, and moments from the second line, the Devils are getting close to nothing out of six forwards in the lineup. Glendening still doesn't have a goal, and look, he's a fourth liner, and you signed him to be a penalty kill and face off specialist. He's got no goals, and look, do you expect it? No, but zero. You maybe want two. You maybe want three. It could be the difference in a game and the difference in their record. Juho Lamigo, no points. I bang my head against the wall with this signing. I still don't know why he is was one of the first from the summer. He's one of those guys, so I'm just unsure what the thought process was there when Luke Glendening. Look, maybe they didn't know they can get him at the time, but they could have just signed him to the one by one and used that asset elsewhere. So that one definitely makes me shrug my shoulders. Paul Cotter, he's a guy who, when we talk to him after a game and he'll score a goal, he'll say, "Oh, finally!" Like I was, I needed that, right? Like, it's been a while. Like I need to score more, and he shows all the tools in the world to be able to do that. But it just seems like maybe the IQ isn't caught up with his hands, and is there a way for that to connect with each other? Um, and like we said, Stefan Nason, he's a guy who, again, 20 plus goal scorer for the Devils last season. He was a big part of why, they went so well early. He kind of disappeared for a little bit there, but then he got back, in at a better goal scoring pace, and um, ultimately helped the Devils get to the playoffs. But right now, I mean, he's not contributing really much at all. So, except for, when he steps up in a fight for, guys like Nico Hischier, or, guys like, um, who is it that he stepped in for against Tage Thompson? Just those things there where he steps in and maybe tries to shift the momentum. Those are things you want to see from a guy like him for sure. But, you also want to see him get on the score sheet as well. He hasn't been doing that. So, um, that brings us to Steven Stamkos, who, again, Pierre LeBrun reported today that hearing that the Devils are eyeing Stamkos in a potential deal. And should it surprise you to hear that name? I don't think it should, because you think of the summer of 2024, the Devils were a suitor and they were actively talking to his agent and looking to, bring him to New Jersey. They might have even signed him to the contract that he has in Nashville now. Um, Ultimately, Stamkos decided to go to Nashville with Jonathan Marchessault, and it hasn't worked. Um, so now you're hearing, well, maybe the Predators will listen on Steven Stamkos, who is signed to another 2 years after this season at $8 million per. Um, he reported, again, LeBrun reported that the Devils are talking about it internally, because, again, they were interested in him before. He was likely going to have some sort of similar contract with them now. So why not see if you can get him perhaps at pennies on the dollar? And I'm not sitting here saying you're going to get him for a low AAV, but if there is some sort of deal, you'd think that the Predators have to eat some money. So it's a possible match for the Devils to acquire a guy like Steven Stamkos by the trade deadline. We'll see if that comes to fruition. And if not by the trade deadline, I would assume that this conversation doesn't go away in the summer either. I think that it's going to still be a possibility. They were interested in him before, and that there's no reason why they wouldn't be interested in him now. I understand that he's 35, turning 36 in February, but here are the numbers. All right. 40 goals in 23-24 with the Lightning. He goes to the Nashville Predators and he falls off a cliff. He has his lowest goal scoring total in a non-COVID, non-injured season since his rookie year, right? That was the second lowest goal scoring total he's had in his career, pace-wise. And this year, he's on a 24 goal pace. So he's projected to score even less. He's got one goal in October, um, and seven goals have come between November and the beginning portions here of December. Um, Here are my thoughts on Steven Stamkos. I look at a guy who in Tampa Bay, he was fed pucks from guys like Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov, who might be the best distributor in hockey. Um, He had guys like Victor Hedman on the blue line to help in that area as well. A top-notch power play who he just had to get open and just fire pucks from the circle. Nobody's doing that in Nashville. He has to be that guy in Nashville. They have Ryan O'Reilly as one of their top centers, who I think he's actually even playing in a depth role for them right now. But he's a two-way defensive specialist. He's not distributing the puck. They have guys like Philip Forsberg, who is a scorer on the wing. They have guys like Jonathan Marchessault, who is another scorer on the other wing. Their center depth is certainly weak. They don't have anybody who is going to feed, Steven Stamkos 40 goals like Nikita Kucherov did in in Tampa Bay. Eric Holla, we know him well. He's not a distributor. Fedor Svechkov, I mean, he's a guy who he's young. They like his outlook, but right now he's not ready for that kind of commit or that kind of role. Michael McCarron, he's a depth guy. He's in and out of the lineup. You got to build a team down the middle, which is kind of what the Devils are trying to do with Hischier and Hughes, and Glass is a good 3C. Um, we can talk about the Devils probably need another center, but I tend to think that on a retained deal, and look, it's a huge risk and it's a high risk, high reward type thing. On a retained contract, where say the Devils were paying Stamkos $5 million, $6 million, right? As opposed to the 8 for the next couple seasons. Look, maybe it works out in a better way. And what I mean by that is if Steven Stamkos comes to New Jersey, he's going to get a similar, not as good, obviously, but a similar Nikita Kucherov type experience where Sheldon Keefe now has the option to reunite Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt on a line. They can do all the work. We've seen them do it before. We saw them connect on a goal against, I believe, the San Jose Sharks, where it was just the two of them, and I think it was whoever was on the line that night. Perhaps it was Andre Palat. He was just there. He didn't he didn't have to do much because Bratt and Jack just have that chemistry, and they willed the Devils a goal there, right? But now add Steven Stamkos to that mix. Now they have another option. Now they can look at, okay, we'll draw the eyes here, but Steven Stamkos just has to get open. And look, he's still got the shot. I don't think it's the shot that's the problem. I think it's the fact that he has to be the driver in San Jose. So look, you throw him in the top six. He's certainly going to be an upgrade over an Andre Palat. He's going to be an upgrade to the top six as a whole, and you're looking at a top six of Meyer, Hischier, and perhaps a Gritsuk with Stamkos. Or no, actually, you'd slide Mercer back. So it would be Meyer, Hischier, Mercer, Stamkos, Hughes, and Bratt. And now you're looking at a really good top six there. Now, again, this is not without its risks. A 35-year-old player who's aging with a pretty bloated contract. We'll see if there's retention if this deal does come to fruition. Um, are the underlying numbers because of him, or is it on the underlying numbers the way they are because of he's on a team who doesn't create chances for themselves anyway, right? The Nashville Predators are a bottom feeder, right? They're at the bottom of the league, and it's because they can't score goals. And yeah, Steven Stamkos is supposed to be that solution. He's supposed to help towards that solution. But if nobody's there to feed him, how is he gonna score? 2.59 goals per game for the Nashville Predators right now. Who's distributing there to send Steven Stamkos pucks? Because that he wasn't doing it himself in Tampa Bay, at least not in the later years where he scored 40 goals. That was the work of Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov, the power play. Look, this could be a Tyler Toffoli like acquisition where, again, stand in the left circle, rip shots, or stand in the right circle, rip shots. Um, Again, 35-year-old player. He has had some injury history. Are his underlying statistics because he's not a good player anymore, or is it because he's on a team that's not driving play, thus it's impacting his game? It's really hard to toe the line. It's a huge risk. It's a huge reward if it works out. But do the Devils have a finisher that's half as good as Steven Stamkos is in his career? We're talking about a two-time Stanley Cup champion. You're talking about um, a future Hall of Famer. You're talking about a 60 goal scorer in his lifetime. You're talking about a 50 goal scorer in his lifetime. You're talking about a multi 40 goal scorer in his lifetime. You can't say that for anybody else on the Devils. So again, huge risk, but it could come with huge upside. What does it cost? I don't know if it's going to cost as much as, many might think it's going to cost. Yes, Barry Trotz is trying to draw a line in the sand and say this is my price. First round pick plus for Ryan O'Reilly. Is that realistic? According to a lot of the people that I talk to around the league, no, he's not going to get that type of return for Ryan O'Reilly. So, is he going to get a haul for Steven Stamkos? He'll get something. Maybe it's Seamus Casey and a couple of draft picks going the other way. You pay that price because then you still have assets to deal. If a potential Quinn Hughes trade comes down the line or some other big trade comes down the line. But again, certainly big risk um, to take on a 35-year-old player who is not going well right now, who's seeing some of the least amount of production in his career so far. I feel like it does seem obvious that it's because of who's around him. But again, at his age and his cap hit, you need to proceed with caution. So it's certainly an interesting time if the Devils and the Predators come together on some sort of a deal here for Steven Stamkos. Checking in on Quinn Hughes real quick. Nothing really here to report. He's showing signs of frustration. What does that mean? I'm not sure. Talked to a couple people about this over the last few days, and a lot of people said, "Look, don't expect anything yet." I don't know if it happens this season. It might be more of a summer thing. And look, I know we all want Quinn Hughes in New Jersey, and we want to see the Hughes Triforce united, but there's going to be a lot of teams who are interested in him. And unfortunately for you guys, there's going to be a lot of teams interested in him close to this state that we're in of New Jersey. Down the turnpike, across the river. Those might be teams that you see step up for a guy like Quinn Hughes. So and also Motor City, where he is from in Detroit. You're going to see teams like them step up and try to acquire a Quinn Hughes. So there's going to be competition for it. Obviously, the Devils are the standout team here, but I wouldn't write his name in pen in any lineup anytime soon. All right. Tonight, the Devils play the Vegas Golden Knights. The lineup changes are Nason moves up to with Nico and Mercer. Sorry, Nico and Meyer. Bratt moves down with Palat and Mercer. Trying to just distribute the offense there, just break it up a little bit. It obviously wasn't working last game. So can they get maybe Palat and Mercer going in the goal department with Bratt there as a distributor? And can they get Nason going with Meyer and Nico driving play? Gritzik down with Glass and Brown. That's just a line that was really, really strong in the beginning of the season before Brown got hurt. And look, Angus Crookshank joins the team, and he's a guy who he plays like a little bull in a china shop. I kind of like him. He's a smaller forward, but with the Senators, he showed a pretty decent shot. And look, he's going to be stronger than Lamico. Again, that's a signing and a player who I just don't. He doesn't do anything for me. And look, maybe that's not the worst thing because when I watch him play, he's not noticeable in a negative way either, but he's not necessarily noticeable in a way where he's contributing much to the lineup. So Crookshank gets a shot tonight. And look, maybe he maybe he steals a roster spot for at least the short term. Jacob Markstrom will be in net, so it's back-to-back starts for him. We'll see how he does tonight. And I think that's just a nod from Keefe to Markstrom. Hey, good job against Dallas. Sorry, we didn't get you the win, and it wasn't necessarily your fault. But Markstrom's career versus the Golden Knights, 6-10 with an 8.99 save percentage and 3.26 goals against average in 18 games. So he knows the Vegas Golden Knights well. He doesn't necessarily have the best numbers, but I think this is more about the recent performance. He looked stronger on Wednesday, and we'll see how he plays tonight, which means Jake Allen will get the start on the road tomorrow against the Boston Bruins. Which Markey is going to show up, says at JSnow RV8LS in the chat. And that's a good question. We will see which one shows up tonight. Vegas won their last two games. They were on a 4-game losing streak prior. This is the first game of their 5-game road trip through the Metropolitan Division. 12, 6, and 8 with 32 points and second in the Pacific, 15th in the league in goals for per game at 3.04 per game. Obviously, their leading scorers are Jack Eichel with 11 goals, Mitch Marner with 25 points. Barbashev is playing pretty well, nearly a point per game. And like I said earlier, they could either face Carter Hart in his Metropolitan Division return, or they could face Akira Schmid in his return to the Prudential Center. We will see. All right, I think that wraps it up for the week that was, the day that is. Sean, let's get to a couple of comments in the chat. Chat was lively today. Love to see it. A lot of people commenting today, and we love having the contributions here. So thank you so much for stepping in and talking New Jersey Devils with us. At Stephen Engel 8762 says Consiliev, Haminaho, retaining Dougie, and 2 first-round picks get you Sherwood and Quinn Hughes. That's a great question. It's a big price to pay, but you're getting a big package in return. Silya, I look, with the way the Devils blue line is structured right now, and if Simone Nemeth is not going to be a trade piece moving forward, I support fully. Yeah, you move Silya if you have to. I think he's going to be a big presence in the NHL at some point, but the Devils have equally big of presences with Luke Hughes and Simone Nemeth, right? Nemeth is a second overall pick. Luke Hughes is a fourth overall pick, and those guys project to be top pairing number one defensemen. And you're seeing some more of that out of Nemeth lately, and you're seeing out of Luke Hughes some inconsistencies, but he's got that profile. I'm fully in support of moving Silya for pieces that would make sense, especially for Quinn Hughes. But Silya, Haminaho retained Dougie and 2 first-round picks for Sherwood and Quinn. Is that going to work? It's hard. It's hard to say definitively yes or no. I would think it's close. I would think that that's something that would make the Canucks at least think about it. Um, is it a center in there, which the Canucks reportedly want and have been wanting? No. But are they going to get a better package than that? I'm not sure. You heard talk about, oh, they want a center. Could Dylan Larkin from Detroit be available? I don't see the Detroit Red Wings trading a Dylan Larkin. I mean, they're building something there, and he's the center of it. So I don't see them trading a Dylan Larkin. I don't see them trading a Lucas Raymond. I don't see the Philadelphia Flyers trading a Matvei Michkov, which has been, the rumored trade piece that could go for a Quinn Hughes return. So I think something like that, there's a lot of value there going to Vancouver. Do they want to do a full rebuild? No. Haminaho might be close. Dougie gets in the lineup right away. You get two first-round picks. I think that could be something that would make the Vancouver Canucks at least think about it. So, good question. It's certainly something I think that Jim Rutherford would at least contemplate. What else we got here, Sean? Jay Snow says Fitz has to do something. We're in year 3 now since the 22-23 season ended, and we're no closer to winning. Okay, so this is a good point here because I want to just say, look, you're right. And none of the teams that we have seen in the days or the years leading up from that season have looked the same. The problem is the Devils don't do well with Jack Hughes out of the lineup. And I think, yes, I don't think it's too early to say that something has to be done via the, trade wise, because how many times can you try the same thing over and over again and get the same results, right? Jack Hughes gets hurt. The team was going well. Now they're not, and you're just proven over and over again that the Devils aren't as good with him out of the lineup, and it can't be an excuse anymore because at this point it's kind of a given. Yeah, he's going to get hurt. You need somebody in that lineup who's going to continue to help drive play when he is out. So certainly, I do think that something does need to happen because right now the Devils don't have any play drivers. I mean, Jesper Bratt is supposed to be that guy. He's just not doing it at the moment. Timo Meyer and Nico Hischier are playing well, but other than that, nobody's driving play. And without Jack Hughes in the lineup, the wins are not happening. They're on a 3-game skid at home, which is certainly a concern. So I do think it's not too early to get ahead of this. The Metropolitan Division is wide open. The East is wide open. Get somebody in here, get somebody comfortable so that by the time the trade deadline comes, you already got your acquisition. Maybe you add something small if you need it. Maybe you add a depth defender, maybe you add a depth center, and all of a sudden now you're fully equipped to go into the playoffs and be, a force there. I think it's certainly fair to say that we've seen enough of a sample of this team since 22-23 that they need another piece maybe in the top six. They need a center. They need somebody who's going to drag the team into the fight and get them out of these tough situations like they are in right now in a three-game losing streak. So I'm all for, go out and make a trade now sooner than later to get them acclimated and ready for the playoffs. We got another one here from Rick Roma. I think this past summer, where Fitz basically did nothing, will be his downfall. He has to be on the hot seat. So I'm not there yet. I don't think he did nothing. I think that he did exactly what he said he was going to do, and go out and get depth. And he did that. He got Connor Brown. He brought in Gritziak. He didn't have to do anything on the blue line, although I'm now starting to think otherwise there. I think they needed another depth piece for the blue line, but we could talk about that later. But this team does have depth pieces who have performed previously. Now, I mean, look, now it's on the players in the depth roles who are just not performing. Like Paul Cotter was a bigger presence last year. He's not doing that now. Stefan Nason was a bigger presence last year. He's not doing that now. Connor Brown was going real well in the beginning of the year, and that was your biggest depth contribution, and he's not doing that right now. And that's why you see the difference between how they started versus where they are now is partially because of Connor Brown's play. And look, he's not playing horribly by any means, but he's also not filling the net like he was. So you want to see him get going again. Um, it's been tough for Glass. He's been in and out of the lineup, but he's another depth piece who was going well for them in the beginning, and then he got hurt, and it's been start and stop for him. But now he's in the lineup consistently. You want to see him going a little bit better. He was scoring a little bit more often, and now he's dropped off. The thing is, they're just not getting the goals from the bottom six because they've had to just do so much mixing and matching with the lines that I'm not sure that there's enough chemistry being formed right now for the bottom six. But I'm intrigued to see what we get out of Crookshank tonight because he's a guy like, look, Fitz brought in guys like Crookshank and Thomas Bordeleau. Those are skill players. Those are players who can put up some offensive numbers, at least in the AHL. And I would like to see, what Crookshank can offer the Devils tonight, potentially, providing a bit of a boost on offense. And again, he's gonna be on the fourth line, but if he can at least make sure the puck is not in the defensive end and drives it toward the other end of the ice where the Devils can at least play with the puck in the other zone, that's certainly going to help. So I don't think he did nothing, and I'm not at the point right now where I'm saying Fitz is on the hot seat, but certainly he does need to find some help for this team. So I find it interesting that we started to hear Steven Stamkos' name, and by no means is that a depth ad. That would be a top six ad, but I think the Devils are actively looking on the market. It's just going to be the same cliche thing of right now the market is just too expensive. So is that an excuse? No, the Devils need to do something. When that will be, I'm not sure. What else we got here, Sean? At Steven Engel 8762 says, would 2 second rounders get Ryan O'Reilly? It's a good question. Again, like I said, I don't think that, the Predators are going to get a first round pick plus for Ryan O'Reilly. They did say that they're treating him like he has a no trade clause, even though he doesn't. So maybe that's them saying, like, look, we're not trying to move him because he doesn't want to go anywhere, but we will do it if, you pay this price. But at some point, they got to get realistic over there. Right now, this is 2 seasons in a row where the Predators think that they're going to be this juggernaut, and they're not. So they're going to have to look in the mirror, be realistic with themselves, and say, like, okay, it's March 1st. We're out of playoff position. We have nothing coming through the pipeline outside of Matthew Wood and a couple other lesser value prospects. We need to do something here and perhaps get some assets for in draft capital or younger players here. So I could see 2 second round picks working. Perhaps again, I keep throwing Seamus Casey's name out there. Look, I know everybody loves the player, but there's just nowhere for him to play on this team right now. Maybe Seamus Casey in a second round pick go the other way, but something like that could probably fetch Ryan O'Reilly, unless there's a bidding war for him, and then maybe you see a team throw a first round pick out there. But look, if the Devils want to be a contending team, they could offer their first round pick. I mean, if they're going to win, essentially that's going to be a second round pick anyway. If it's in the 20s or later, you're looking at a second round pick value. So, 2 seconds could get it done, but maybe a first gets it done, and perhaps something like a Lenny Hamanaho, where you're trading something of lesser value than Casey, but something still of substance that might make the Predators consider trading a Ryan O'Reilly. Let's do another one or two, Sean, and then I gotta get to work. There's a game to play tonight or to cover tonight. Unless we have no more in the chat. Oh, Sean's telling me to address the poll that we ran during the stream. I'm technologically disadvantaged, so I have to figure out how to see that poll. Can you bring it up, Sean? Do we have that? There was a poll on stream. I don't even know what the poll was. See, that's the beauty of having a producer, is that he does all these crazy cool things behind the scenes, and I have no idea. I'm just here talking hockey because I'm just a simpleton. But what do we have here? The poll. Sean says it's actually in the stream on YouTube. So let me just move over to YouTube here. Again, simpleton. I am a guy who doesn't really know how to use these computers. I'm more of a paper and pen journalist, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here we go. So, should the Devils trade for Steven Stamkos? And it's a simple but effective poll. We had 28 votes, and 54% of you said not at all. 39% of you said yes, but it depends on the return, and 7% of you said yes, we should. Certainly an interesting poll there, where majority of you said no, but a decent amount of you said yes. And look, again, I'll just make my argument that the the case for me and the Devils getting Steven Stamkos is, you better be sure that you're getting the right player. You better be sure that you're getting a contributor to the top six. You better be sure that he's going to be able to bring that shot and score goals, so long as the play around him is getting him the puck. You better be sure you're getting the Tampa Bay Lightning version of Steven Stamkos 2 seasons ago, versus the Nashville Predators version of Steven Stamkos you're seeing in the past 2 seasons. So that's all I'll say about Steven Stamkos. I got a foot on both sides of the fence there. I understand the pause. I understand not wanting to trade for a 35-year-old. But the Devils are looking at winning now. And I think that's the reason why they're looking at a guy like Stamkos, a guy who has won, a guy who's captain a team that's won, a guy who brings leadership to the locker room, and a guy who scores a ton of goals. Is he doing it right now? No. But would he do it if Jack Hughes is feeding him the puck? I tend to think that might be the case. Would he do it if Jesper Bratt is feeding him the puck? I tend to think that might be the case. So I understand why they're talking about this internally. I understand why their eyes are on him. They were before. This was probably the thought process before, and now he's available again. So, look, they haven't pulled the trigger on him. Maybe the good news here is that they're just discussing, like, look, we're not scoring as many goals as we should be. We were scoring at the beginning of the season something around 3.5. Jack goes down, and now we're down to 3 even goals per game on average. So, again, perhaps the good news is that they're just talking about, hey, we have an issue, we have a need here, we need to score more goals. And Steven Stamkos is one of those guys who brings them. Again, it's a calculated risk. We'll see how this goes. Just want to say the rest of December is pretty much mapped out in terms of guests. We have a great guest coming on next week. We have an even bigger guest coming on in 2 weeks. And then later in the month, right after Christmas, we have another loser coming on the podcast, and Ryan Novozinski, who will join us once again on his monthly hit on Devils Rink Report. So we have a great lineup of guests coming this month. So if you're not already, please make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications when we go live, and be sure to just like our videos. If you like this content, please do us a favor, share these videos, share these clips, and just tag us, at James Nichols NHL or at New Jersey Devils, or sorry, NJD Hockey Now on Twitter. And just, encourage others to come and watch and join the chat, and, be here to have these Devils conversations with you guys, and with myself and with our great guests. So that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Devils Rink Report. I am your host, Devils beat reporter James Nichols via New Jersey Hockey Now. Again, please like this video, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. Thank you so much for being here today. And there's a game tonight. Vegas Golden Knights, 7 o'clock puck drop at the Prudential Center. I'm headed there now. And until next week, I'll talk to you guys soon.